Welcome, everyone, to Family Comes First. I'm Vincent J. Russo.
And I'm Victoria Roberts-Strogan. Thank you for joining us. Vincent, there have been 23 school shootings where someone was hurt or killed just in the 5 months of this year.
That's one a week. It's horrible. That includes the 17 people, 14 students and 3 staff who were killed and more than the 17 injured in a mass shooting at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, on February 14, 2018. Today, we have invited back Howie Crooks, whose son Noah survived the shooting.
We will also hear from experts on what schools are doing to beef up their security in the wake of these mass school shootings. Welcome to Family Comes First. School safety has become a priority for schools all over this country.
Today on Family Comes First, we will be addressing school safety with Howie Crooks, whose son Noah was there during the shooting in Parkland, Florida. Thank you again, Howie, for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So, Howie, first of all, on an immediate level, how has your family reacted since the shooting? Do they feel safe? What's going on?
Sometimes that answer depends on the day. Certainly soon after the shooting, for my wife, Robin, she found it very difficult to get through a day being at home and getting through her everyday life without focusing on any moment something like this could happen. And so that was very, very traumatic for her. And we've sought out a lot of professional help to try to get us all through the trauma that we've all experienced. On another day, my daughter Jocelyn, who as you know was in Israel on the day of the shooting and started the new school year for the first time going back to the school campus, she had a very difficult time adjusting to walking through the school without thinking that this is what happened here. This is what happened to all of my friends. If I turn this corner, is the shooter going to be there? The portables with, not having any place to safely, hide yourself or protect yourself.
Portable classrooms.
The portable classrooms, they're called portables. They don't have any closets. They're nice classrooms, but they don't have any place for you to seek refuge, so to speak. And then, unfortunately, this school year, what we have found is an inordinate number of false alarms, false fire alarms going off, which, considering everything that has happened, you can just well imagine what your immediate reaction is, because when they have scheduled alarms, including the active shooter, there's a separate code for that. There's usually advance notice to both the parents and the students so that they know exactly what time of day it's going to happen and that this is what it is and that it is a drill. But when the fire alarm goes off and you're not expecting it to, and it goes off towards the end of the day, the same time of day that the shooting occurred,
Oh my God.
What kind of a day did you have that day at school? Your entire day and your entire school experience has been upended because then it has happened 2 or 3 times in a matter of 2 days sometimes.
So everybody's on edge.
So everybody's on edge. And what kind of a learning environment is that?
What's causing false alarms?
Well, in one particular case, I'm sorry to say, there was a special needs child who was not being supervised properly and got into the hallways. In other cases, believe it or not, it could be somebody who is just pulling a false alarm.
Yeah.
And the school has been trying to get a waiver from the state requirements, because you do have to have a minimum number of alarms, but they're trying to lessen that, but that's red tape and protocols.
I had the opportunity to speak with Max Schachter via Skype. Max lost his son Alex in the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School shooting. Here's the second part of that conversation.
Alex passed away because that monster shot right through the classroom window in Alex's classroom door. And after the shooting, I also had a senior in Marjorie Stoneman Douglas at the time, and I have a seventh grader at the adjacent middle school that's going to be at the high school in a couple of years. So I wanted to make that school safe, so I said to all the county, local officials, what can I do to make this school safe? Show me the best practices, show me the standards. And I was dismayed to learn that there are no school safety standards. After children died in fires in school, we developed the fire codes in the United States, and it's worked. No child has died in a fire in 60 years. But there are no school safety standards, even after 19 years since the Columbine shooting and Sandy Hook, nothing. So I set out on a mission to create those national school safety best practices, and I started a foundation called Safe Schools for Alex. I've traveled all over the country. I've been to Washington 8 times. I've met with the vice president. I've met with every cabinet secretary. A month ago, I testified in front of the Federal Commission on School Safety, imploring them to develop these best practices so that schools around the country know what to do and how to make their schools safe. Once these best practices are produced, Safe Schools for Alex intends to raise funds so that we can issue grants to schools all around the country to make schools safe.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the implementation side of this, because it seems like an overwhelming project to get up and running and then implement. And I applaud you for everything you're doing. And so, with our viewers here, how could they support you?
They can go to our website. It's safeschoolsforalex.org. And I really appreciate any help you can give us, whether it's $5, $10, anything will help issue grants to all schools all over the country that can't afford to make their schools safe.
You have a beautiful legacy with his music and such an important legacy in terms of school safety. Thank you so much. Thank you, Max, and thank you, Howie, for being with us on both parts of this series. Since the shooting, there have been security initiatives that have been implemented at the high school. What's going on?
Well, soon after the shooting, they started off with requiring that all students wear and carry clear backpacks so that you could see inside. So over 3,000 some odd backpacks were distributed to all of the students at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. That had an interesting impact too, though, because on the one hand, you want to say, well, that's a good safety measure so that somebody couldn't conceal anything like a weapon. But on the other hand, when you see your child leaving for school in a clear backpack, you're reminded daily that you're living in a different time. Right. And that this is only happening because of the shooting that occurred on February 14th. They have also restricted access, the various number of access points. The high school is on a campus that previously had any number of access points. So they have reduced the number of access points significantly at the beginning of the school day and towards the end, as well as during school while school is in session. For parents who are accustomed to being able to bring a forgotten lunch to their kids or forgotten homework assignment, they are no longer permitted on the campus. Any kind of situation like that, they cannot address until after the school day when their child comes home from school. All students walk around campus with an ID hung around their neck on a lanyard. My children have given me feedback that, any kind of a plastic card could be hung from a lanyard. Nobody really looks at them, so it's questionable what kind of effect having a student ID would actually have, but those are the kinds of measures
Right.
that the high school has
So-
taken.
We have a lot more to talk about, but right now we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back here on Family Comes First, protecting our children. Welcome back to Family Comes First. We're speaking with Howie Crooks, whose son Noah was there during the shooting in Parkland, Florida. Also with us is Chief Stephen Skrzynecki from the Southampton Police Department to discuss school safety. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome,
Glad to be here.
Thank you for giving us your time today. So, in connection with this issue, it's never only one thing that we can do to prevent some of these tragedies from happening. Talk to us a little bit about what you see in terms of all the initiatives that can be taken.
Well, I think you're 100% correct. There is no silver bullet. There is no one fix for this very complex problem. I think you need to look at it from prevention, need to look at it from the point of target hardening, need to look at it from the point of response, and then you need to look at how we practice all of those things. But it starts off with, I think, with prevention, and studies show, after action studies show, that in almost every one of these incidents, there's been some indicator that this is going to happen. In most cases, the actor has talked about this or has messaged to somebody his or her intentions. In many cases, there's more than one actor. So there have been opportunities to intervene, and there are cases where intervention has taken place. In those cases, you don't normally hear about.
Of course.
But I think a very critical piece to this is finding ways to educate our youth and create an environment where they can feel free and comfortable to report something that comes to their attention. So one of the things that we're doing in law enforcement, working with our counterparts in school districts, is trying to establish that environment, trying to establish an atmosphere where people have a clear path to give that critical information to somebody who can act on that information. And most police departments, my own included, have changed the protocols on how we deal with that information. We're taking steps immediately to interview people, to investigate the potential of a violent act. We're going right to a household. We're not spending days on long, extensive background checks. We realize that if somebody is talking about doing something, they might very well do it within the next moment or the next day.
So you have first-hand experience on this.
Yes.
You want to share?
Well, firsthand experience in terms of dealing with the situation. Fortunately, we have not had a situation like this on Long Island. Right. So when you say firsthand experience, for several years now, both in my capacity as I worked for Nassau County Police Department and now in Southampton Town, I've been responsible for first responders and trying to find ways that we can give ourselves the best advantage to deal with these situations, which begins with what I call smoke before the fire. And then we move into how do we respond if we unfortunately miss that opportunity to intervene before something happens.
At the same time, we need to make our schools safer.
We also took a trip to visit with Lee Mandel, the CEO for IntraLogic Solutions, a company who was working with schools to add extra security. Let's take a look.
So IntraLogic's been in business since 2004. We started working with the government sector, doing work when it comes to security, access control, perimeter protection. Obviously, in light of the events that have recently happened, both after Sandy Hook in 2012, as well as Parkland this past year, school security has been a top priority. Right now, we're working with over 150 school districts nationally, 2,000 buildings, and many of the school districts in New York.
Plain Edge Public Schools is 5 schools, 3 elementary, 1 middle, 1 high school, or approximately 3,000 students large. And in addition to that, we also have about 850 full-time and part-time staff members. Obviously, society has changed. Students come to us on a daily basis. Parents expect that the student's going to return home safely, and my job also is to protect our staff. So we put in technology tools in order to help enhance the information that's available and also to connect us to law enforcement.
And after Parkland, we learned about what we call our 4-point process when it comes to school safety and security. We talk about infrastructure hardening and hardening the perimeters of the schools, making sure that we avoid the situation where we're vulnerable to shooters coming into the building. We talk about information sharing, which is one of the big misses that happened in Parkland, how we can get this information from social media and share it with the right authorities prior to this event happening so we can mitigate it. But in the event that 1 and 2 fail, and we actually have to go into a response, we talk about how that response can be integrated and tied to law enforcement. And then how we can constantly train. And I always give the example, no one has died in a school fire since 1956. Why do we have so many deaths when it comes to an active shooter? And it's because of the constant training, and repeating all these training mechanisms.
I'll be honest with you, I think it's very important that we safeguard all of our children and all of our staff at all times. Unfortunately, the events that have gone on in the past 2 to 5 years have led us to the place where we are today. It behooves us to take care of everyone inside of our sites and inside of our schools, so I feel it is absolutely necessary to have it.
So IntraLogic provides a varying services of security. So we start with our perimeter of the schools. We really focus on hardening the doors. So one of the things we do in a lot of schools is card access systems, where we have identification so that only key personnel can be coming into the building. We also have intercoms so that people have to validate and identify themselves prior to entering our campus. Here at Plain Edge High School, where we are today, we have technology known as a man trap that enables people to really secure the perimeters of the buildings so that before people come in, we have a visitor management system where they have to identify themselves, check against a known database before authorizing them access to the building. Once we're in the perimeter of the building, we're actually in the physical school itself, we have different components like video surveillance that enable us to really see what's going on in the hallways, understand the perimeter. Here we have a command center at Plain Edge, as well as several other schools on Long Island that are easily able to see all this data in one concise place.
So you're in the Plain Edge Public Schools Emergency Command Center. This is an unmanned command center, which is available obviously to first responders. It also has our video access as well as our door access control systems available, and we're able to monitor anywhere in 7 facilities that we currently monitor today. It's important for us to be able to have eyes into all sites and to be able to know what's going on around the district at all times. In addition to that, it also helps us with a messaging system for a 1-button lockdown system, which is an emergency reaction system to any type of incident where we feel we need to lock down or lock out the building.
We also have mapping systems where we map all the physical buildings. We work with, like I said, over 2,000 buildings nationally where we map their systems so that we can share it in a common and understandable format for law enforcement so that they can see where all these assets are an electronic floor plan. And then most important to me is the 1-button lockdown system. IntraLogic sells the 1-button lockdown system nationally. We also have grants that we write for a lot of schools to be able to provide this, whether it's a private school, a public school, an educational establishment, or a religious establishment. We have these technologies in place that automate the process of a lockdown.
When we lock down the building, the first thing, the most important thing is obviously to safeguard all people in the building. In a nice, comfortable voice of the principal, it basically announces that the building is moving into a lockdown. Teachers secure the doors, move out of the line of sight. The system automatically contacts the police department, first responders, to come as quickly as possible. It also locks all the exterior doors. There's strobes on the exterior and the interior of the building to let us know that we're in a lockdown. In addition to that, it takes over all local computers and intelligent whiteboard screens where we can have one-way communication to the rooms silently to let people know what's going on. It also sends text messages to parents to let them know that we've moved into lockdown. Please do not come to our schools. Please await further information. We're in a lockdown.
Parents are always very concerned when it comes to safety and security of students. Here in Plain Edge, we actually did a roundtable with the Nassau County Police Commissioner as well as several other law enforcement experts, and we talked about some of the questions and concerns that parents actually had. And we actually invited parents to ask us questions. And one of the biggest things we always say is we need to make schools a safe place. We want parents to feel comfortable sending their students to school so that when they drop them off in the morning to school, they're going to come home safe at the end of the day. And we also want students to feel comfortable when they're in school so we don't distract from the learning environment that we try to create. And what schools are doing around the nation right now is building these modules in place to really secure the perimeter, secure the campuses without really turning it into a prison.
The Plain Edge Public Schools are one of the safest schools in the state of New York, according to a recent survey. With the equipment that we've installed, with the additional security, I'm absolutely positive that we're running some of the safest schools in the country.
So, Chief, we've just seen some of the technology that's been developed to respond to this problem. How is law enforcement interacting with these solutions, working with schools to implement them? What's being done today?
What you just saw is a very good example of what we're doing. We're trying to use technology to leverage ourselves and give ourselves that small edge, that small benefit that can be critical in any of these instances. You heard that gentleman talking about target hardening, which is, just making that school a little bit more difficult to penetrate, giving anybody who wanted to disrupt the school a challenge to get in. So, and there's many different ways to do that, as you heard. Second to that, which really it comes into play with law enforcement and is a great advantage to law enforcement, is the opportunity for law enforcement to get some insight in real time as to what's happening within the school. So imagine that you're a police officer and you just got a call for a shooter, an active shooter in a school. You're responding to that school. Your mind is racing. What am I going to do when I get there? Where is this shooter? How am I going to approach this? You may not even be able to get into the school because most schools operate now in a lockout capacity. But imagine if you had technologies that would feed the closed circuit video system that exists in almost every school right into a 911 dispatcher, so that imagery and all of those cameras within the school could be seen by a 911 operator who could focus on the school while you're driving to the school, find the shooter, maybe see and ideally see a footprint of the school and know where this person is moving toward and give you that information as you're responding. Take it a step further, and if they have remote door locks, if that technology would enable the 911 operator to suggest to you, the responding officer, go in through the north side of the school or the south side of the school. I see the shooter now. He's moving from point A to point B, and I will unlock a door for you as you get there. I will lock it behind you. Or I see a group of students on the east side trying to exit the school. I'm going to open that door and let them leave. So control of the environment, getting real-time information to the responding officer is critical in a response mode.
How do we, on a practical level, implement in terms of training? Tell us about what training then is going on for the responders.
So it was a very dynamic change in response to active shooter following Columbine. And most people know this. During that era of policing, SWAT teams, or special weapons and operations officers, were held to go into those environments, and police would secure the perimeter and wait for SWAT teams to go in and then confront the shooter. Sadly, Columbine demonstrated that people were being shot while officers were outside waiting for these special tactical people to arrive. So police departments across the country have changed their protocols. So now the first officer is trained to go in immediately. Now, when you consider that, you have to also take into consideration what kind of protection does that officer have. So most police departments, clearly here on Long Island, have increased the protection for the average officer. So some officers on Long Island now have semi-automatic weapons in the car that they could utilize in a situation like that. They're not coming out of the car if they go to your house to take a report of a stolen item or something, but if they're responding to an active shooter, they may grab that rifle. In the trunk of the car, many officers now have an enhanced bulletproof vest that will protect them from an automatic weapon. Their normal vests that may be worn under their garments may not, and they have a ballistic helmet. So they can, again, go back to what we just talked about. They may be responding with real-time information feeding to them through the technologies that we just saw. They may arrive at the scene, open the trunk real quick, put on a helmet, put on a ballistic enhanced vest, grab a rifle, and now be much better prepared to address whatever they need to address.
Yeah, so you're really highlighting how many steps can be taken. There's no one step that's really going to bring a solution, but it's very, very encouraging to hear that this is happening. And we heard from Max earlier about best practices and standards, that we need national policy on this.
Yes.
And so this is encouraging. And I thank you so much, Chief Stephen Szczenecki, for taking the time today, and for Howie being on both of our segments.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Pleasure.
much.
Thank you for joining us. We're going to take a break, and we will be right back on Family Comes First. It's become necessary to have this level of security in our schools so our children can be safe, and so that we can prevent tragedies like the one that we spoke about today.
Absolutely. Joining us now to share his experiences is our spiritual advisor, Father Anthony Stanganelli. Welcome, Father Tony.
Welcome.
Thank you again so much for your kind welcome and for allowing me to participate in this show and to witness both of these shows and seeing in one sense, the shock of how our environment has changed so radically, so
world has
quickly.
changed.
Our world is changing.
Yes.
And yet the responses to that changing environment have been really so well coordinated, so well thought out. As so impressed with what I've heard in these last two segments of our own response to a changing environment. And so no one needs to feel so powerless or so overwhelmed that we can't all together use our own energies and talents that God has given us to be able to pull together reasonable solutions to what seems to be an irrational situation. There are reasonable solutions and reasonable steps that we take. But obviously those steps take into account everybody: parents, children, teachers, administrations, law enforcement, legislators, activists, all of us working together. But change is happening, as you said, and change is certainly possible. And that does give us a spirit of hope in a changing environment, that we're able to manage these things through the grace of God and through the talents He's given us. We're able to manage this in such a way that we can have a sense of safety and security in our world.
Well, there is hope. Things are being done, and we've done it before. You know, maybe we have to take our shoes off at airports now, and we didn't used to have to. But change has prevented tragedies from happening again, and maybe we can prevent it, in this case, by changing our strategies for dealing with school safety and hardening targets and educating our children as to how to talk about these threats with their families. Yeah.
Sure, and what I've got to say, I'm proud that we can have this dialogue, because we look at TV and we see all the negatives, and the negatives out there are, we can't effectuate change, we can't make it better. We see all the tragedies, and it's important for us to see those tragedies so we do take action. But I'm very proud that we're able today in these two segments to talk about real people, real lives, and the things that are happening. And so I'm hopeful as well, and I thank you so much for your thoughts and wisdom on this.
Thank you again.
With increasing fear of mass shootings in schools, it is no wonder that educators and parents are looking to increase security. For a list of resources and additional information regarding our show today, please visit Vincent's Law Firm's website at vjrussolaw.com.
Thanks to all our viewers for joining us, and remember, family truly does come first.